Welcome everyone to the Ramana Maharshi International Zoom group based here in San Diego, California. It's good to have each and every one of you with us today. From London, Michael James joins us as he does on the first Sunday every month of the year for the last, I'm going to say 3 or 4 years, Michael. You've been around us for a long time now.
Yes.
And if you're watching on YouTube, we invite you to join us in person in a group forum here. And all it takes is a quick email to me, and I'll put you on our list. And I'm Ted. The email address is newsguy55, newsguy55. I was once both of those, a news guy and 55 decades ago, at AOL.com. Okay. So Michael, good morning to you. Let's get started with our first question, if it's okay. And I think everybody's and ready to go. It's from Steve. Not the Steve who's with us today, Steve Palmer, but another Steve. I have a serious question on the difference between manōnāśa and manōlaya, which was spoken about last week by Michael at the beginning of the session. I believe it gets the crucial distinction which must be made by everybody. And in manōlaya, the ego has subsided prior to the arrival of the real self. In manōnāśa, however, the ego also subsides upon the arrival of the real self. So what makes manōnāśa permanent, given that ego flees and does not see the self? Finally, he says, well, it's a couple more sentences. It cannot objectify it and thus does not attain the crucial insight. If subject-object awareness is mutually exclusive with non-dual awareness, then how does ego ever get conquered? Since just like manōlaya, the ego does not meet, so to speak, the true self. And finally, he says, it disappears. So where and when and how is the insight into its own limits happen? Otherwise, we just have one state, which vanishes when the other rises, but this leaves no way for insight, no meeting or reconciliation of the two. The criminal, in the analogy used, is never caught. He escapes when the judge enters. Michael, I had to read that several times myself just to make sure I'm staying on the same page. So take it with your very clear answer. I'm sure it follows.
Right. Okay. To answer this adequately, we need to take a step back. Let's set aside all thought of manolaya and manōnāśa for the time being. How to annihilate ego? How can ego be annihilated? That's the crucial thing. And then we can consider why it's annihilated in manōnāśa, but not in manolaya. In order to understand how ego can be annihilated, we need to understand what ego is. And to understand that, first of all, we need to understand what we ourselves actually are. What we actually are is pure awareness. That pure awareness means awareness that is not aware of anything other than itself. That is, it is just aware without being aware of anything. So that pure awareness is our very being. So it is what shines in us as our fundamental awareness, I am. So there is never a moment when we are not aware of ourself. However, in waking and dream, we rise and stand as ego. And as ego, we are not aware of ourselves as just I am. We're aware of ourselves as I am this body. So even in that awareness, I am this body, the awareness I am is present there. So our real nature, what we actually are, is the very heart of ego. But ego is that pure awareness that we actually are, mixed and conflated with adjuncts. So ego is the conflation of that pure awareness with the adjuncts being this body. And as Bhagavan clarified, the body means not just the physical form of the body, but everything that comes along with the body. That is, we never experience a dead body as ourselves, so it's always a living body. So accompanying the physical form of the body is life, what is called prana. and we never experience a sleeping body as I. We always, whenever we experience a body as I, it's always a body that seems to be awake. Even in dream, the body we experience as I seems to be awake. So in that body, there is always a mind, intellect, and will operating. So these five, body, life, mind, intellect, and will, this bundle is what we collectively experience as I. So for shorthand, Bhagavan refers to it as body, because it's all centered around this body identification. So ego is the false awareness, I am this body. Our real nature is what we actually are is the pure awareness, I am. So since ego is a false awareness of ourself, that is an awareness of ourself as something other than what we actually are, it can be destroyed only by correct awareness of it ourself. What we actually are, the pure awareness that we actually are, is always aware of itself as it actually is. So it is not in need of anything. But as ego, we are in ignorance. So in order to destroy ourself as ego, we need to be aware of ourselves as we actually are. That is, we as ego need to experience ourselves as pure awareness. But as soon as we experience ourselves as pure awareness, we thereby cease to be ego, because ego is that pure awareness mixed and conflated with adjuncts. When we experience ourselves as just the pure awareness, ego is thereby annihilated. In classical Advaita, this is expressed in somewhat different terms, but Bhagavan has clarified the meaning of those terms. That is, what is said in classical Advaita is that the root problem is what is called avidya, sometimes called ajnana also. Avidya or ajnana means ignorance. And the solution to ignorance is obviously knowledge. You can't get rid of ignorance in any way other than by knowledge. So if we want to get rid of ignorance, we need to have knowledge of that of which we are ignorant. So the root ignorance is ignorance of ourselves, that ignorance of what we actually are. So only the knowledge of what we actually are can destroy this ignorance. Bhagavan has clarified, but that ignorance is nothing but ego, because ego is the false awareness, I am this body. So that is what is referred to in classical Advaita as avidya or ignorance. And the vidya, the real the knowledge that will remove this ignorance, is only the pure awareness I am. So pure awareness I am is always shining, but it's now seemingly covered by ego. It's not, obviously, pure awareness never ceases to be aware of itself as it actually is. So it's only in the view of ourself as ego that the pure awareness that we actually are is seemingly covered by the adjuncts with which we've conflated it. In other words, this body consisting of 5 sheaths. So it is necessary for us as ego to be aware of ourselves as pure awareness. As soon as we're aware of ourselves as pure awareness, the impure awareness, I am this body, is thereby annihilated. So since ego is present only in waking and dream, it's only in waking and dream, waking or dream, that we can come to know ourselves as we actually are. That is, what we actually are always knows itself, but we as ego need to know ourselves as we actually are. And as soon as we know ourselves as we actually are, in other words, as soon as we know ourselves with pure awareness, we thereby cease to be ego. If we understand how ego is annihilated, then it will become clear why ego is annihilated in manōnāśa and not in manōlaya. That is, manōlaya and manōnāśa are both states in which they're states of dissolution of mind. Dissolution of mind means dissolution of ego, because ego is the root and essence of the mind. So manolaya means a temporary dissolution of mind, whereas manōnāśa means destruction of mind, annihilation of mind. In other words, a permanent dissolution. So as we've seen, in order to annihilate, there's only one way in which ego can be annihilated. Since ego is ignorance, it's a false awareness of ourself, it can only be destroyed by correct awareness of ourself. So only by ego knowing itself as pure awareness will it thereby be destroyed. So what is the difference between manolaya and manōnāśa? Both are states of dissolution. In the state of dissolution, in the actual state, once ego and mind are dissolved, there are no differences, because all differences appear only in the view of the mind or ego. So in the actual state of manolaya or manōnāśa, there is no difference. The difference appears only from the perspective of ego in waking and dream. So in one state of manolaya, which we're all familiar with, is sleep. Every night we fall asleep. And in that state of sleep, sleep here means dreamless sleep. In that state of dreamless sleep, there is no ego or mind. But what is so there's no defect in that state, except the fact that we come out of it. And our coming out of it is true only from a perspective of ego in waking and dream. So sleep seems to be a defective state because it's temporary. But it's temporary only from the perspective of ego, but seems to have come out of that state of sleep. So in both, when ego is dissolved, what remains is the one fundamental reality, which is the pure awareness that we actually are. So what shines both in sleep or any other state of manolaya and in manōnāśa is only pure awareness. Nothing other than pure awareness exists in these states. But from the perspective of ego, sleep or any other state of manolaya seems to be temporary because we have come out of it. So why do we come out of states of manolaya and not out of states of manōnāśa? The reason is manōnāśa means annihilation of mind. The mind or ego is annihilated only when we as ego know ourselves as pure awareness. In the case of sleep or any other state of manolaya, that is states of any state in which we cease to be aware of ourselves as I am this body, and consequently cease to be aware of anything other than ourselves, such as sleep, coma, general anesthesia, or the what is called Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi. That is the samadhi that the yogis aim to achieve. In all these states, these are states of manolaya. The reason ego is not destroyed in these states is because we go into these states by some means other than being aware of ourselves as we actually are. So in the case of sleep, we go into sleep because of tiredness. We are too tired to, we've risen as ego, we've been dancing around all day in one activity or another, and we become tired and we have to subside back into sleep. So the cause of sleep is tiredness. The cause of coma could be because of an accident, a head injury, or it could be because of a drug overdose or taking inappropriate drugs or something or other. Something has caused that. In the case of general anesthesia, it is carefully controlled anesthetic drugs applied by an anesthetist brings about that state of manolaya. In the case of Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi, it is brought about by pranayama and other yogic exercises. None of these are means, none of these are means to know ourselves as we actually are. So that is why, though the mind is dissolved in these states, it comes back again. So these are only temporary dissolution of what is called manolaya. In the case of manōnāśa, manōnāśa is the state of dissolution that is brought about by being aware of ourselves as we actually are. That is, we as ego, in waking or dream, need to turn our attention back within to attend to ourself alone. If we attend to ourself keenly enough, we thereby cease to be aware of anything else. When we cease to be aware of anything else, we then experience ourselves as pure awareness. And by experiencing ourselves as pure awareness, ego is destroyed. So what I had explained last week when I was talking to the London group, what I had explained was in the case of manōnāśa, the ego is destroyed before it, the ego, the dissolution of ego is brought about by ego being aware of itself as it actually is. So the awareness of itself as it actually is precedes the dissolution of ego. That is the cause for the dissolution of ego. Whereas in other states of manolaya, the dissolution of ego is caused by some other means. And because ego is dissolved, then pure awareness alone remains. So the pure awareness, the way it's worded in this question is a bit, is not a very accurate way of describing it, the arrival of the real self. But real self doesn't need to arrive because it's ever present. The real self means our self is pure awareness. We are always pure awareness. That pure awareness is always shining. But in waking and dream, it shines in the it is obscured by the appearance of ego, by the appearance of this false awareness, I am this body. So it is only in waking and dream that ego can be destroyed. The analogy referred to at the end of the question about the criminal in the analogy used is never caught. He escapes when the judge enters. That's not exactly how I said it. What I said is, if a criminal has, say, committed a murder and is sentenced to a death sentence, that death sentence can be carried out only if the criminal is present. If a criminal is tried in absentia, that is, if the criminal is on the run, they don't, the police and other authorities don't know where he or she is, even though they're sentenced to death, that death sentence cannot be carried out in the absence of ego, in the absence of a criminal. Likewise, why ego is not destroyed in manolaya? Because it's absent in manolaya. So though pure awareness alone is shining in manolaya, ego doesn't experience itself as such because ego is absent at that time. It has gone AWOL. Because in other words, it dissolved back into that state of manolaya, whether it be sleep or nirvikalpa samadhi or coma or whatever. So the destruction of ego can occur only when ego is present, and ego is present only in waking and dream. So in waking and dream, we need to bring about the dissolution of ego, not by tiredness, not by yogic exercises, not by any drugs or any head injury or anything, only by being aware of ourselves as we actually are. That is why self-investigation is the only means by which we can annihilate ego, as Bhagavan made clear. So we as ego need to investigate ourselves. That is, we need to focus all our attention on ourselves alone. When we focus our attention on ourselves keenly enough, our attention is thereby withdrawn from all other things. So we cease to be aware of anything other than ourselves. So when we as ego cease to be aware of anything other than ourselves, we thereby experience ourselves with pure awareness. And by experiencing ourselves with pure awareness, we thereby cease to be ego. This is how the destruction of ego is brought about. I hope this is clear. Does anyone have any questions about it? Is the explanation I've given, does it sound clear to everyone?
Ronnie's got a question for you. Go ahead, Ronnie. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you. Michael, I have a question. So
Yes.
in manōnāśa, which is the total dissolution of the mind,
Both
as
manōnāśa and manolaya, both the total dissolution, but laya is temporary, nāśa is permanent.
Right, right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
in manōnāśa, there's the permanent dissolution.
Yes.
And in deep sleep, when there is temporary dissolution,
Yes.
we are not aware of anything. So if someone tries to attack the body or harms us, we are not aware of it because we are in deep sleep.
Yes.
And there is no sense of I.
Yes.
So in manōnāśa, which is a permanent state, the self, since the small self does not exist,
Yes.
if someone tries to kill me, the me meaning the big self, I have no defense. I just allow it to happen if that's what's supposed to happen. But I've also seen that people with these evolved people, that no harm comes to them at all.
Right.
And I've seen that with some tigers, and you know how people, these sages have managed to ward off everything. The tiger becomes a cat. And so what is the mechanism that operates in that manōnāśa, that it seems like the cosmos is guarding your body because you have decided to, dissolve?
Right. Okay. We need to understand the fundamentals of Bhagavan's teachings to understand this question. In verse 26 of Uludunapadu, the reason I refer to this particular verse is Bhagavan says it particularly clearly here, but he implies this in so many other places. What he says in verse 26 is, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what it is giving up everything. So, according to Bhagavan, there is no body and world except in the view of ego. So when he says, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence, everything there means all phenomena, including body and world, all thoughts, and all phenomena of all kinds. So these exist only in the view of ego. So Bhagavan is very explicit. In sleep or any other state of manolaya, there is no body and no world. Many people have difficulty accepting this because they say, oh, I may not be aware of the body and world, but other people see my body lying there on the bed. Other people are aware of the world. So how can you say the body and world don't exist in sleep? Bhagavan had a nice reply for this. He said, why do you need the evidence, the testimony of others to say that your body and the world exist in sleep? Do you need the testimony of others to know that you existed in sleep? You know that you existed, so you know you existed because we're clearly aware I am in all states. But to know the existence of the body and world, we have to depend upon the testimony of others in waking and dream. So Bhagavan said, if the body or world exists in your sleep, why don't they come and tell you that they exist in your sleep? Why do they have to wait till you wake up till they tell you that you exist in sleep? So we have to be we have to be ready to set aside all our preconceived ideas about the nature of the body and world and all other things. All these things exist only in the view of ourself as ego. So in states of manolaya, such as sleep, there is no body and is no world. People say, oh, but if someone comes and shakes my body when I'm asleep, I wake up. So doesn't that prove the body must have been there in sleep? No, it doesn't prove that. All it is, but when we wake up, we wake up to a state in which we find someone is shaking our body. That's a part of the, according to Bhagavan, this waking state is just a dream. So the dream of the next day's the dream of the next day begins with someone shaking our body and waking us up. But we become aware of that only when we're awake. We weren't aware of that in sleep. People say, oh, but I hear my alarm clock going off. That wakes me up. Because we are so we are so accustomed to taking the external world to be real. We think, I wake up hearing the alarm clock, therefore the alarm clock must be what woke me up. It is not what woke us up. It was our prarabdha to wake up and to hear that alarm ringing. So we need to give up our idea that this body and world are real. This body and world have no existence whatsoever, except in our view. They are no more real than the body or the body or world that we experience in sleep. Sometimes, for example, we may wake up in the morning hearing our alarm ringing, and we may stop the alarm and we get up and brush our teeth and get dressed and get ready to go to work. And then we wake up again, because the first waking wasn't actual waking, it was only a dream. So since that dream began with the ringing of our alarm, are we to say, no, that alarm was there prior to the dream beginning? No, it wasn't. It was only a dream alarm. It appeared only in dream. The alarm that seems to wake us in waking is likewise just a dream alarm. That alarm comes into existence only when we wake up, not prior to our waking. So, as Bhagavan said, there's no body at all in waking. Sorry, there's no body or world in sleep. If we understand that, then we will understand the state of the jnani. In our view, Bhagavan seems to be a body just like us. But according to Bhagavan has no experience of body or world or anything. It's only because we take him to be a body that he seems to us to be seeing the world and to be reacting to the world and answering our questions and everything. But if people ask him, Bhagavan, you say that the jnani is not aware of body or world, but we see you're interacting, you're responding to the world. Bhagavan had several answers for this. One answer he gave, he said, in the later years of the ashram, maybe in the 1940s or sometime, a radio was installed in Bhagavan's hall. Generally, they wouldn't play that radio, except when there was maybe some famous singer was singing some classical devotional song, that would occasionally be played on the radio. So on one such occasion, after listening to someone singing some song, Bhagavan said, see this radio, but we hear this beautiful singing coming from the radio. But if we open the radio and look inside, we won't find anyone singing in there. Likewise with the jnani. Bhagavan said another thing. He said, the singing we are hearing, as if it's coming from that box, is actually coming from another source. It's coming from the transmitting station, meaning that. Bhagavan said exactly as the case with the body of the jnani. The body of the jnani seems to be like any other body. But if we could open it up, we would find no one inside. There's no ego inside, no experiencer inside. It's only in our view, but that body seems to be just like us. So where is, when we ask Bhagavan questions, we get such nice answers. When people experience so much love from Bhagavan, where is the clarity of those answers, and where is that love coming from? As Bhagavan says, it's coming from another source. Once someone asked Bhagavan, when we ask you questions, where do the answers come from? You say that you are not answering anything. Where are the answers coming from? Bhagavan said, from the same source from which the questions arise, from that source also the answers arise. So where does everything arise? The first thing to rise is ego, and from ego everything else rises. But where ego rises from is the pure being I am, the pure awareness I am, but we actually are. So the ultimate source of everything is that pure awareness. So the questions that are arising, the answers that are given, seemingly given by Bhagavan, are coming from the same source. And the questions are coming from the mind, but the mind is coming from the ultimate source, the pure awareness. That is where the answers are coming from. So if we want to understand Bhagavan correctly, we need to be ready to completely change our perspective, our way of looking at this, looking upon the body and world. This body and world have no existence whatsoever, independent of our perception of it. When we are dreaming, the dream body and dream world seem to be so real. If we were having this discussion in a dream, some people may say, oh, no, see how real this is. This is much more real than dream, they may argue. But then when we wake up, we find it was all just a dream. According to Bhagavan, this waking state is no more real than a dream. So just like the dream body and dream world do not exist except in the view of ourself, the dreamer, this waking body and waking world do not exist except in the view of ourself as ego. Is that a clear and satisfactory answer?
I don't know if she's here yet or not, but we got 3 more questions waiting for you.
I thought that was perfect. So
Okay.
basically what you're saying is that
Thanks
when
for
there is no existence of the self or Ramana, then there is no existence of anything else too.
No, not that. When there's no existence of ego, there's no existence of anything else. But the self or Ramana, that is the one thing that always exists. But
right.
yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
Alrighty. Michael, we've got 3 more questions for you on this same topic, Manlaya, manōnāśa. And first for me, because I asked this of myself right at the very, very beginning, it's a very brief question, and that is, how common is it exactly for somebody to have manōlaya in meditation? I mean, I would think the two might go together a lot, but I know I had it in a phenomenal way 35 years ago, but it never left me about the experience of it, but the experience itself, of course, ended. Is it common in meditation for this to occur?
Anyone who has tried to meditate will surely have had, even if they haven't experienced nirvikalpa samadhi in their meditation, they will surely at some time or other have fallen asleep in meditation. That is manolaya occurring in meditation.
Okay.
The thing is, if we meditate on nothing other than our own being, so long as we are holding on to our own being, that is, so long as our attention is fixed firmly on our own being, we are remaining balanced in a state that is, there are 2 ways from which we can lose our hold on that self-attentiveness. One is that we get distracted by thoughts and our attention goes outwards away from ourselves. The other is that we succumb to sleep. So long as we are firmly holding on to our being, we will not be carried away by other thoughts, and we will not subside into sleep. But if our hold on that self-attentiveness slackens, then either of these two may happen. Either getting carried away by our thoughts or falling into sleep.
And you say, if we meditate, you just said it a minute ago, if we meditate on our own being, and my question would be, what else would we choose to meditate on?
How many people actually meditate on their own being? Very few. Most people meditate on a mantra or a name or form of God or some chakra in the body or all sorts of things people meditate on. But to meditate on our own being, that should be our aim. But ultimately, that is the only meditation that can bring about the annihilation of mind.
Excellent. Thank you.
But most of us, meditating on our own being is not an ordinary thing, because to the extent to which we attend to our own being, to that extent do we as ego subside. So if we meditate on our own being deeply enough, ego is thereby annihilated. The reason none of us have yet meditated on ourselves, on our being deeply enough, is because we are not yet willing to surrender ourselves. We're not yet willing to let go of everything else. So we may partially meditate on ourselves, but we never completely let go of everything else. But if we persevere in this practice, then our hold on other things will get weakened. We'll have less and less inclination to attend to anything other than ourselves, until eventually our love to attend to our own being will be stronger than any inclination we have to attend to anything else. So that is the time when we surrender ourselves completely and merge forever back into our being. That is the state of manōnāśa.
Thank you for that clarification, because we're all Ramana people here. I would think, what else would we meditate on but our own being? Until you pointed out the surrender aspect.
But even if you talk to Bhagavan's devotees, you'll find many of them, they don't really understand what Bhagavan means by self-investigation. Many people think it's asking the question, who am I? Or looking for something. All it is, as Bhagavan says, it is keeping our mind fixed on ourselves. That means keeping our attention fixed on ourselves, on our own being.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. We have Melissa and Sri Ram next. So Melissa, your turn.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Michael. That is very clear. And your last statement about meditating on what we really are, the Sat-chit, the awareness being in which all is always arising, all appearance, including all appearance. And so I think I'm very glad that these questions about manōnāśa and manolaya came up, because those were the very questions I wanted to ask today, and I'm seeing the answer now very clearly. What I would just want to further clarify here is that when we say that body, mind, and world seem to exist only when ego seems to exist, I think the most important word in that statement is the word existence, because it's clear that body, mind, and world never actually exist. They seem to appear, but they have no actual existence.
Exactly.
Yes, that all that has existence is Sat-chit, the awareness being, which it cannot not be.
Yes.
It by its very nature, it is
existence itself. It's being itself.
Existence itself. Yes.
So, what you say is important. That is, for example, when Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Ulludanaptu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist.
Yes.
We need to understand when he says if ego comes into existence, he doesn't mean if ego actually comes into existence. He means if ego
Right.
seems to come into existence.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
one thing that there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 16, in which Krishna says, there is no existence of what doesn't exist, and there's no
Right.
non-existence of what does exist.
Yes.
So what does that imply? That means what exists must always exist. If, as Bhagavan put it very nicely, he said, if something exists at one time and not at another time, it doesn't actually exist even when it seems to exist. What actually exists must always exist.
Yes.
Whatever comes into existence will certainly cease to exist. So even when it seems to exist, it doesn't actually exist.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Michael. That
Yeah.
I think for myself, that is the key.
Yes.
That is yes. Thank you
Because
very much.
the fundamental principle of Bhagavan's teachings and of Advaita is that what actually exists is only ourself. Only one thing, there's no second thing.
Yes.
So all
yes.
this appearance of multiplicity, all this multiplicity is nothing but an appearance. It seems
Yeah.
to be, but it is not.
Yes, and it is an appearance in the Sat-chit that is our true
Bhagavan
essential
was even
being.
more precise. He said it's an appearance only in the view of ego.
Okay,
Actually, in the
yeah.
Sat-chit, nothing, in the view of Sat-chit, nothing
Ah.
ever appears or disappears.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I will more continue to contemplate that more deeply.
Even ego seems to exist only in the view of ego. In the view of Sat-chit, there is no ego, because ego is a
Right.
false awareness. An awareness,
Yeah.
I am this body. The pure awareness, the pure Sat-chit is never aware of itself as I am this body. It's only ever aware of itself as I am.
Yes, and so then and then I return to knowing that ego is seen through by Sravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana, so
Yes.
that the more and more deeply that I contemplate the truth that the teaching is pointing to, and contemplate it, and then dwell within it, dwell in it, then it becomes clearer and clearer. Thank you very much, Michael.
Contemplating the teachings is the Sravana and Manana. Contemplating what the teachings are pointing at, which is namely our own being, that is the Nididhyasana.
Yes. Yes.
So the Sravana and Manana, they are useful to the extent to which they support us in the Nididhyasana. But the Nididhyasana is what is crucial.
Yes, and the Nididhyasana is the literally the dwelling, the seeing that is our very knowing that is our very being.
Yes, but even that's not the best way of saying it, because knowing that is the mind that knows that, but it is knowing just our being, nothing other than our being. That is knowing that I am. That's why Bhagavan said, even I am Brahman is ultimately not true, because Brahman is
there's
an
no
idea
I,
we
because
have.
there's no
So,
I.
yeah, the ultimate truth is I am I. There's nothing other than I.
You've reminded us of that 5,000 times in the last 4 years, and it needs to be repeated every day.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have Leon. I'm sorry, Leone, but we'll get to you, Leone, in just a second. She's new to us from Spain, but Sri Ram's been patiently over there waiting to ask a question about the dream state.
Yeah, Michael, it's just outstanding what you're saying. Last 2 times you have mentioned about possibility of doing self-inquiry in waking and dream state, where the ego seems to exist.
Yes.
Has anybody tried, and is there a way of using a dream state for self-inquiry?
Why
and
not?
how to do it?
If you, well, in exactly the same way, but we do it in the waking state. That is, what is self-inquiry? What is self-investigation? In the 16th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan gives a very clear and simple definition of what he means by Atma-vichara. He says, Sadakalamum manate atma-vil vetirabhutikutan Atma-vichara mendrupaya. That means the name Atma-vichara is only for always keeping the mind on oneself. Keeping the mind on oneself means keeping our attention on ourselves. So attending to ourselves, that alone is self-investigation, Atma-vichara. Just like we try to attend to ourselves in the waking state, we can also try to attend to ourselves in the dream state. In fact, if we persevere in this practice enough in the waking state, we will automatically find that in dream state, the memory to turn our attention back to ourselves keeps on coming to us. And sometimes you'll find in a dream, if you turn your attention back to yourself keenly enough, you'll wake up. Because in dream, we are generally not so strongly attached to the body as we are in the waking state. So dream is generally a less stable state than the waking state. I mean, they're both dreams. There's no substantive difference between them. It's just a difference in the degree to which we're attached to the body.
Okay.
And some dreams, obviously, we're more strongly attached to the body, so those dreams seem to be more stable dreams. Other dreams where we find scenes keep on shifting. We're one moment in one place and we're next moment in another place. One moment we're talking to one person, suddenly that person morphs into another person. Those sort of dreams, the reason for that instability in those sort of dreams is because we only have a very tenuous attachment to that body. So those dreams will, a little bit of self-attention in such dreams will immediately wake us up.
One small question. You mentioned that if we do not focus our mind on the self, stay put on it, it can either sleep or it can go to a distraction.
Yes.
Is that the time that Bhagavan's method of using the I thought, I, to take us back? Is that when it's helpful?
No. Well, again, we need to be clear about terminology. What is usually translated as I thought is the term that Bhagavan used. In Sanskrit, he used the term ahamvriti, which almost literally means I thought. In Tamil, he used the term nanenam ninevu. That means the thought called I. That is ego. What he's referring to is ego. It's not the verbally repeated thought I. That is, as Bhagavan often repeatedly emphasized, ego is nothing but a thought. But of all thoughts, it's the first thought. Because though ego is a thought, it's a thought unlike all other thoughts. Because all other thoughts are jada. Whereas ego is chit jada granti. So it's the only thought that has an element of awareness in it. So all other thoughts appear only in the view of ego. So when Bhagavan uses the term, the thought called I, or I thought, he's referring to ego. He's not referring to the thought I. Bhagavan did say in the 5th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan said, even if one goes on thinking I, it will lead to that place. That place means the heart, our own being. Why he said that is, and he also gave that advice sometimes orally in answer to questions. For example, there was a couple who used to come from Kanpur. What were their names?
The Khanna?
Khanna, yes. But once Mrs. Khanna asked Bhagavan, I'm a busy housewife. I've got so much responsibilities at home. I've got to cook, I've got to take care of the house and everything. Where can I find time for meditation? Bhagavan said, if you do nothing else throughout the day, continue in your mind thinking I. Why did Bhagavan say that? Because if you think of something, supposing someone says to you, repeat the word mango, mango, mango. When you're repeating the word mango, what do you think? What comes to your mind? As soon as you hear the word mango, a certain fruit comes to your mind. That is the efficacy of repeating the name of God. If you're repeating, for example, Ramana, 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 that's an aid to keep your mind fixed on that to which that name refers. So it helps us to keep our mind fixed on Bhagavan. So Bhagavan often said the first and foremost name of God is I or I am. So by repeating the word I, it constantly reminds us of our own being.
Okay.
Awesome. Awesome. One last extension, Michael.
Yes.
You mentioned that Ramana only exists, and not the ego. Is that the same as Ekajivavada that you talked about? That there's only Ramana and nothing else exists?
No, Ramana is not Jiva. Ramana, who is Ramana? Bhagavan himself, when he was asked that question, he said, Ariyati Tarajivara Dahavari Juguhail Aribai Rami Paramatman Arunachala Ramanan. That is, Arunachala Ramana is Paramatma, but exists blissfully as awareness in the cave of the heart lotus of all jivas, all different jivas, beginning from Hari, beginning from Lord Vishnu himself, in the heart of every jiva, what is existing as awareness, that is Ramana. Ekajiva Bhadra is different. Ekajiva Bhadra is what Bhagavan, for example, is expressing in verse 26 of Uludunabdu, when he says, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Because everything exists only in the view of ego. When we look outwards, we see so many people. Because we as ego take ourselves to be a person, we take every person to be an ego. So it seems to us that there are numerous egos, 7 billion egos in human form, or 7 or 8 billion, I don't know what the number is now, and so many other egos in different forms, in the form of cows and horses and elephants and cats and dogs and tigers and so on. So all sentient creatures seem to us to be an ego. They seem to be perceiving the world just like we are. But all those countless other jivas, other egos, exist in whose view? In the view of the one ego who is seeing them all. So this Ekajiva Vada, this is not a teaching to be applied in our external behavior. In our external behavior, we are in this dream world. There seem to be so many people just like us, and we have to behave in an appropriate way in this world. But the reason, why did Bhagavan teach us Ekajiva Vada? That is in order to turn our attention back within. In whose view do all these many jivas exist? Who am I? That is it's to turn our attention back to ourselves.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Because
That is
Ekajiva Vada,
very profound.
Yeah, Ekajiva Vada there's another aspect of Bhagavan's teaching, which is called Drishti Shrishti Vada. That Bhagavan clearly teaches in Nana and Uludunaptu and so on. Drishti Shrishti Vada means there is no Shrishti, no creation independent of Drishti. So the world is created by our seeing it. Just like in dream, the dream world has no independent existence. It exists only in our view. So Bhagavan said, likewise, this waking state exists only in our view. So in that teaching, that Drishti Shrishti Vada teaching, Ekajiva Vada is implicit in that. Because in a dream, how many people are, the dream world exists in the view of how many people? Well, not even people, to say, because the people also appear, but it appears in the view of one dreamer. In the view of that one dreamer takes itself to be a person in the dream and sees so many other people, and all those other people, so long as we're dreaming, all those other people seem to be seeing the same world that we are seeing. And if you ask anyone in your dream, are you seeing this world? They say, yes, of course we're seeing it. So when we look outwards, there's always the appearance of nana jiva, of a huge variety of jivas. But if we look within, there's only one jiva. And even that one jiva, if we investigate that one jiva, that will disappear. And then what will remain is the one Satchit, the one pure being awareness, which is Bhagavan Ramana, the true
Then
form
we
of
will be with
Bhagavan
Bhagavan.
Ramana. Yeah.
Then we will meet Bhagavan.
That is
Awesome.
the truly
Awesome.
meeting Bhagavan, yes.
Yes.
I liked very much what you said about in our external awareness. I never thought of it quite that way before, to stay with I am. And you've referenced that several different ways already. Let's go on to our next question. She's been very patient sitting here from Spain. Leane, go ahead with your question.
Yes, thank you. I would just like to quote shortly Nisargadatta Maharaj. He says, wisdom is knowing I'm nothing, love is knowing I'm everything, and between the two my life moves. Because you're speaking so much about the dream, the world being a dream, or people also referring to it simply as an illusion. And I often still feel in the moments where I would say I come from the awareness, and in the field of perception, what we call now the world or appearance, it's such an awe. It's like to experience from the state of awareness the world, which is myself basically, in different appearances, but it's so beautiful to experience. And so I'm sometimes still wondering, why is it all here? No, is it not maybe it was meant to be the body being an instrument, what it basically is, to experience? Because I know I am always, but maybe I want to experience, and therefore I need the appearance or the form, so I can experience the love which I am. And this is what I often feel Nisargadatta refers to also in this quote. Do you have any comment on that, Michael?
Firstly, according to Bhagavan, love and knowledge are one and the same thing. Secondly, I am nothing or I am everything, both actually are incorrect, because everything implies the existence of many things.
Yes,
Nothing
yes.
implies the existence of nothing. According to Bhagavan, we are the only thing. And that state in which we experience ourselves as the only thing, that is the fullness of knowledge and the fullness of love. So long as we are loving, that this is a fundamental mistake people make. They think love implies two. In fact, you will hear many theologians, not only Christian theologians, Islamic theologians, even Hindu theologians, many of Hindu those who are not Advaitins, they will argue love requires two. So you can only have love if God is other than yourself. You can only love God if he's other than yourself. But Bhagavan points out the very simple truth. Do we not all love ourselves? We all naturally love ourselves more than we love anything else. So long as we are loving another, there is a division in our love, because we always love ourselves and we love ourselves. So our love is divided. So we can love God fully only when we experience God as ourselves.
Yes.
We can love everything when we experience everything, not as everything, but as one thing, I am.
Exactly. This is what I mean. It's not everything is not, I think in this Sagata, I didn't mean it, I think probably in this way.
Words are always inadequate.
Everything. Exactly. It's not that, but it's what I meant, because I just see now everything is myself, no? But it's still, it's an experience, no? It's to experience it, or the expression of love.
Yes, but when we talk about experience, are we talking about experiencing one thing or many things?
No, I still feel it's an experience as soon as I, like we talk here, wake up from deep sleep. Yeah, so the appearance is here. And then I still feel whatever is being perceived, like even when I move now here, dialogue with seemingly other bodies, but seeing more, it's actually myself, but it's still like, seems like this reflection, no? This is kind of, even if it's not in duality, but it appears like an interplay, and this is the love, you know, I don't know.
Bhagavan put it very simply. In verse 13 of Uludunapnu, Bhagavan says, Jnanamam tane me. That means oneself, who is awareness, alone is real. Nanavam jnanam ajnanamam. Awareness of multiplicity is ignorance. So long as we are aware of the appearance of manyness, that is ignorance. Because we experience the appearance of other things, of multiplicity, only when we experience ourselves as I am this body. And I am this body, that is ignorance.
Yeah. So
the true knowledge, the true love is the state of indivisible oneness.
And now the question is still, which kind of remains unanswered. So this is possible permanently, so to say. It's from the ego coming, of course, here. Yes. As long as the body is here, so I can see apparently you now as fully as myself. Yes, with everything the same. And that's permanent. That can be, that's impermanent.
That's always impermanent. Being aware of ourselves as I am this body, and consequently being aware of other things, is impermanent. Every day that dissolves in sleep. In sleep, there's no body, no world, nothing. There's only pure being. So
as soon as the body, the appearances are, then there is just a few. Everything is myself.
Appearances are all unreal. The only thing that is real is that which is permanent, and what is permanent is our own being, that fundamental awareness I am. That alone is what is permanent. That alone is what is real.
And that would be the dissolution of the ego, but the body remains, and the body or the awareness also, like you said before, knows still how to respond to seemingly others as they are still in ignorance.
If you say the body remains, if ego dissolves, but in whose view then will the body remain? The body exists only in the view of ego.
Right. Yeah, because I still feel sometimes that the body, also from a perspective of the self, is like simply an instrument then to move.
It's not here. From the perspective of the self, from the perspective of pure awareness, Satchit, there is no body, there is no world. It's only in the view of ego that the body and world seem to exist.
Okay. This is still
Bhagavan's teachings are very, very deep. Very radical.
Please come back for more with Michael, because you will hear it another 1,000 times. There is only I am. And you know what, Michael? It's sinking in.
Yeah.
It really is. We have 2 more questions on this. Pardon me?
No, thank you very much. Yes,
okay, thank you. We do have 2 more questions that popped up, and if we have time, we'll get to a second question before and open it up to everybody else for any questions. Suresh, you're in line next. Take it away.
I'm sorry to switch the topic. I just read the Maharishi's Gospel, Sri Ramana Vaimori. I was impressed with the depth of information there. I believe it's also original work from Maharishi. It was published on his 60th birthday, 1939. I didn't see that much you mentioned about Maharishi's Gospel. I don't see anything on your website, but I do see Path of Sri Ramana referred 27 times. So I like to know, did Sadhu Om talk about Maharishi's Gospel, or what's your opinion on?
Yes, if you read Ramanavari, the Tamil original of the Path of Sri Ramana, you will find that Sadhu Om quite often quotes from it. We can't say it's an original work of Bhagavan because it's a work recorded by others. But among those works that are recorded by others, it is a particularly nice one. There are some very nice things in that.
Yes, I did research. David Godman.
First and foremost, we need to understand, if we want to be very, very clear about what Bhagavan's teachings are, the most important thing to study is his own original writings. So I assume you're a Tamilian, so you have access to Uludu Napadu, Upadeshundia, Aksharamlai, Atma-vichara, all these works. If we read these, we understand the real heart of Bhagavan's teachings. Then when we read other books, we can, because there are two things about any book of dialogues. Firstly, these they're not, none of them are 100% accurate recordings, because conversations took place. People heard the conversations and then went away and wrote what they remembered. So if you listen to a conversation, you will be able to, supposing you after this meeting, you go away and try and write down all that has been discussed here. Firstly, you'll be able to write only what you understood, because when we're listening to something, it's going through the filter of our understanding. So if you don't clearly understand something, the impression you'll get is the impression of what you understood, not what was actually said. So that's the first filter. It goes through the filter of our understanding. Then it goes through the filter of our memory. We won't remember everything perfectly. And thirdly, though Maharishi Vaimari was published in Bhagavan's lifetime, the original of Maharishi Vaimari was actually Maharishi's Gospel. It was first recorded in English and then translated into Tamil. But what Bhagavan said was in Tamil. So there's also the translation. Translation is an interpretation. So whoever recorded it in English was translating what they remembered of what they had understood of what Bhagavan had said. And then from English, it was translated back into Tamil. The Tamil actually is better than the English because the people who translated it, they were familiar with the words Bhagavan used. So it's a bit closer to what the original would have been than the English. But though they're very useful things, I like Maharishi's Gospels a lot. There's some very, very important things there. We can't say it's a perfect recording of Bhagavan's teaching. That's one thing. The other important thing to understand is, in talks, it's recorded, but when Yogananda, I don't know if you know who I mean by Yogananda, he was a Swami, I think he was, I'm not sure what part of India he was from, but in the 1920s or 30s, he went to America and he started an organization called the Self-Realization Fellowship. And he wrote I don't know whether it still is, but at one time it was a very, very popular book, an autobiography of a yogi.
Yoga, yes.
Yeah. So he came to Bhagavan in about 1935 or 1936. That is, at that time he was already settled in America, but he came to India on a visit with some of his disciples. One of the questions he asked Bhagavan, and this is recorded in talks, is what instructions should be given for the uplift of masses? Bhagavan simply says the instructions cannot be given en masse. Teachings are to be according to the taught. So that's a very important principle to understand. So all sorts of people came and asked Bhagavan questions. They were asking from all sorts of different perspectives. So the answers Bhagavan gave were often not his pure teachings, because he would give the answer that was most appropriate to that particular individual. So we can't take, even if Bhagavan's teachings have been accurately recorded, we can't say that everything Bhagavan said is his pure teachings, because he has to give teachings that are appropriate to the person who is asking the questions.
Understand.
In fact, some old devotees recorded that sometimes Bhagavan would answer questions, and when the questioner went away, he would then turn around to other devotees who were more attuned to his teachings and would say, though it had to be said like that, that is not actually how it is, it's actually like this. So Bhagavan himself explained, but often his answers were not the deepest answers. It was what was appropriate to the questioner.
So what interests me is David Godman reported that he saw that personally Bhagavan edited before publishing the first edition. But I'm not sure whether he edited Tamil version or English version.
I don't think Bhagavan did it. That I don't believe. I think Bhagavan did read proofs, so he would correct proofs. But I don't think Bhagavan. It was very rare for. Not only Bhagavan's correcting. Bhagavan, if you ask Bhagavan to translate something, Bhagavan will translate it as it is. But people think, oh, because Bhagavan's translated it, he's approved it. For example, Ramana Gita, that work written in Sanskrit by Kavyaganta, Bhagavan was asked to translate that into Malayalam. He translated it as it is into Malayalam. But Bhagavan himself on other occasions pointed out so many shortcomings in that work. So even if Bhagavan translates something, it doesn't mean he approves it. So Bhagavan may correct things. He can correct the proofs, but that doesn't mean that it's expressing his teachings correctly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
The only work we can say Bhagavan was really closely involved with was Guru Vachaka Kavai. Because that, Bhagavan himself sometimes, if Murugan wrote 2 verses, Bhagavan would summarize it in 1 verse. Or sometimes Murugan wrote 4-line verse, Bhagavan would summarize it as a 2-line verse. And there is a proof copy, which David also refers to, in which Bhagavan has, even at the proof stage, Bhagavan was rewriting the verses. He was sometimes changing whole lines in the verse. So that was the one work that Bhagavan took real interest in. Other things he would correct the proof, but just because Bhagavan has corrected the proof doesn't necessarily mean he's approved the content.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thank
But
you, Suresh.
you're right about Maharishi Vaimari. It is a nice book. There are some nice things in it, but we shouldn't take it as 100% accurate recording of what Bhagavan said. And we should understand that we can see it if we read those things. You can see how Bhagavan is adapting his teachings according to the understanding of those he's talking to. So the most important thing is to study Bhagavan's original works and understand the fundamental principles of his teachings, as expressed by most clearly in works like Uladu, Napadu, and Nana. If we have a firm grasp on that, then we can read all these other books, talks and day by day and so on. Of all these, Maharshi's Gospel is the best one, but even other ones like talks, which is full of all sorts of things, we can select what is the best from that, what is truly representing Bhagavan's teachings and what is not truly representing his teachings.
Thank you.
So we have to use our viveka, we have to use discrimination.
Yeah.
And we can hone our viveka by studying Bhagavan's original works.
And that which led me to Bhagavan's original works and works by other authors about Ramana Maharshi was the book you referenced maybe 10 minutes ago, Autobiography of a Yogi, written by Paramahansa Yogananda, world famous at the time and for many decades thereafter, it was written right here in San Diego. Not all of it, but most of it at his farm in Encinitas, right on the Pacific, right on a cliff where his house is still visited today because it's open every Sunday where he wrote the book. So thank you for that. We're going to dip into the group in a second, but just because I want to get to two questions on this first Sunday of July, a real quick second question to you from somebody who wrote it in, Deepak Gurda. It's brief. As I engage in self-attentiveness, he says, as I engage in self-attentiveness, I find it leads to self-abidance, where there is only the self-abiding in itself, just self-knowing awareness. Michael, is this the Summa Iru that Bhagavan Ramana spoke about? And I looked it up, and Summa Iru is remaining in the world and yet distancing yourself from the world by keeping quiet.
Well, firstly, that's a very Summa Iru has got nothing to do with remaining in the world.
Okay.
Firstly, Summa Iru is Summa is an adverb. Iru is the root of a verb that means to be. It's used here as an imperative. So Summa Iru means just be. If we want to make it into a noun, we have to make the Iru into a verbal noun. So we can say, Bhagavan often said Summa Irupadu, which means just being. Or there are other verbal nouns that can be used, Summa Irake, Summa Irital, but usually he said Summa Irupadu. That means just being.
Got it.
What does just being mean? We are all, there is never a moment when we are not. So we always are. So why just be? What does just being imply? That word, the adverb summa, it means just, it means merely, it means, it implies without activity, without doing. But if we understand it correctly in the light of Bhagavan's teaching, what Summa Irupadu means being without rising. So long as we are rising as we are always being. But when we rise as ego, we are seemingly separating ourselves from our being and getting involved in activity. So the state of Summa Irupadu is the state in which we do not rise as ego. Bhagavan actually has given a definition for it in Nana. What he says in Nana, in the 6th paragraph of Nana, he says, Summa Irupadavadu manate Atma-sarupatil laika sevade. That means just being is dissolving the mind in Atma-sarupa. Dissolving the mind means an Atma-sarupa means just being, not rising as ego. So Summa Irupadu means the state of just being. And regarding the earlier part of Deepak's question, he says, as I engage in self-attentiveness, I find it leads to self-abidance. Yes, this is, if we are correctly attending to ourselves, as Bhagavan made clear, the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to things other than itself, and to subside and dissolve back into its source by attending to itself. So by attending to ourself, we as ego thereby subside. Where do we subside? We subside back into our being. So by attending to our being, we subside and dissolve in our being, and thereby just be. That state of just being is what is referred to as Atma-vichara, or self-abidance. That is just being as we actually are. Is just being. And then he says, where there is only self-abiding in itself. Yes, or even better than saying self-abiding in itself, we are abiding as ourself. There's not one thing abiding in another thing. We are being as we actually are. Just self-knowing awareness, he adds. Yes, it is. That is the nature of awareness. Always knows itself. But when we rise as ego, we know so many other things. So we need to attend to ourselves so keenly that we cease to be aware of anything other than ourselves. That is the state of being as we actually are. That is the state of self-abidance, Atma-vichara. That is the state of Samayirapadu. So I don't know if Deepak's with us today, but I hope that was a clear answer to his question.
No, I mean, he's not here with us,
Yeah.
but I think I just heard you say, but as rising as ego, as most of us do most of the time, we are not just being, because
Yeah.
the ego's bringing in
Yeah, we are always being. We are not just being.
not just being.
We are
right.
being plus rising,
Thank you
plus
for that.
doing.
Yeah. Let's see. Somebody's coming in late to the group here. Right now, I should have said this earlier, but it's time to take questions from all of you. We got 32, 33 of you here today. And the other Steve who's with us today puts his hand up first, Steve Palmer. And then anybody else, either put your hand up or put it up as you see it on the screen there, that you can do it, or just speak up. Steve, let's go with you first with a question for Michael.
I was going to ask you, Michael, I'm fairly new to self-investigation, self-attention, and there's always that thing, am I doing it right, when you first do it? And I was wondering, as you've been practicing for, I should imagine, at least 40 years, I'm not so much is the stages you go through, but it is the, when you're coming back to yourself, is that over the decades, yes, I am saying stages, yeah, some things you notice as you practice over a longer period, and maybe the answer is very obvious, that you're better at it, but I just thought I'd ask you because of your enormous experience.
Well, firstly, we can't even say that we're better at it, because we may be better at it, but Sadhu Om used, that is, we get better at it to the extent to which our mind is purified. The impurities in our mind are the Vishaya vasanas. Vishaya vasanas means the inclinations to attend to things other than ourselves. So long as our Vishaya vasanas are very strong, we have strong inclination to go outwards, and so we will generally not be willing to attend to ourselves. The more we attend to ourselves, the more our Vishaya vasanas are weakened and the Sat vasana is strengthened. But this may not be perceptible to us, because this is where the analogy given by Sadhu Om is, or the explanation given by Sadhu Om is very clear. That is, as he said, the more our mind is purified, the more we will see the impurities in our mind. So it may seem to us, after 40, 50 years of practicing this, but I'm even worse than when I started. We may have advanced, but we will be more and more aware of our shortcomings. That is one of the hallmarks. If we are really practicing this properly, we will be becoming more and more humble. And the more humble we become, the more we will see our own shortcomings. And the more we will see that is a very egotistical mind, will like to see the faults in others, but won't like to see its own faults. But the more we go within, the more we will see our own shortcomings, and we will then feel, we won't feel in any way superior to anyone else. In fact, we'll feel lower and lower and lower. Sadhu Om gave several analogies to illustrate this. One of them is, if you've got a very, very dirty cloth, suppose you've got you've got a pair of white trousers and you've been rolling in the mud, the trousers will be filthy. You can't see the deeply embedded stains in those trousers. If you rinse the trousers in water, the superficial dirt will come off, and then you'll see the more deeply embedded stains. As you wash it more and more stains are cleaned off, and the cloth, the trousers become whiter and whiter. But as they become whiter and whiter, you see the deeply embedded stains stand out more and more clearly. Likewise, in this path of self-investigation, as we go deeper, our mind is thereby purified, and so we become the residual dirt stands out more and more clearly. So it may seem to us, but actually we're worse than when we started. But even though we've actually made progress, that's one analogy he gave. Another analogy he gave is the moon. If you see a crescent moon, you can't see any craters. Even if you see a half moon, you can see the craters only very faintly. Even in a 3/4 moon, you can see the craters to some extent, but not very clearly. Only when the moon is full do you very clearly see the craters there. So the more the mind is purified, the more the residual impurities will become clear to us. So we can't really perceive our progress. Also, if we're really progressing in this, we'll be less and less concerned about our progress, because what we are seeking to know is what we always actually are. The one who is making progress is ego. But we are trying to see beyond ego to the underlying reality, which is our being. So we'll be less and less concerned about questions about progress or anything, because we'll be more and more intent on knowing, who am I here and now? Because for what we actually are, for the pure awareness we actually are, there's no coming or going, no progress, we always are just as we are. And that is what we are seeking to know by attending to ourselves more and more. So questions of progress it'll lose it'll be a matter of no concern to us. All we're concerned about is, am I attending to myself here and now? That's all that matters.
Thanks, Steve.
People sometimes ask, how many hours do you spend meditating every day? If we're attending to how much time we're spending, our attention is on something other than ourselves. We shouldn't be concerned about how many seconds or minutes or hours we're attending to ourselves. All we should be concerned about, here and now, I should attend to myself. Because time is something other than ourselves. So if our attention is on the time, we are not attending to ourselves. And there's only one moment when we can attend to ourselves, and that is here and now. So we should take every moment as a precious opportunity to attend to ourselves. In this way, as we become more and more single-minded, all other concerns will drop off more and more. Is that a clear answer to your question?
Yeah, it's actually very beautiful, and I'll go back and listen to it again. One thing I've used as a reminder is something you said about an illiterate woman that went to Bhagavan, be without leaving yourself.
Yes.
And that was something that kept coming back into my mind.
Yes.
As a reminder.
Yes. That just as a point of clarification there, the actual word Bhagavan said was une vidamal iru. Vidamal means without leaving or without letting go of. It implies both meanings. So you can translate it as be without leaving yourself or be without letting go of yourself. Both amount to the same, but
yes.
That's a further clarification of what Bhagavan implied by saying that.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Right.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay.
And thank you for being a newcomer coming to the group. We appreciate it. We're going to another relative newcomer. Barbara, correct me if I'm wrong. Barbara from Hawaii's got the next question, and you've been with us for a couple of years. Fire away with Michael.
Okay. I think you said there's only one ego. And since it seems that there has been manōnāśa for somebody, why does ego arise again? Why is there still ego arising?
Because in the view of ego, the one who has achieved manōnāśa, let's say Bhagavan, is other than the ego. The ego sees Bhagavan as other than itself. So the one ego that exists has to be destroyed. It has to destroy itself. All the other egos or destroyed egos exist in the view of that one ego. So it's the one ego. Who is the one I who is aware of all this? That is what we need to investigate.
Okay, well, I'll think about that.
Is that a clear answer or not a clear answer?
I'm not getting it.
Okay.
Are there one ego or
Okay.
many egos?
In the view of the one ego, there are many egos. And in the view of that one ego, among those many egos, there may be some egos who have been destroyed. Like we see Bhagavan. Bhagavan, we take Bhagavan to be a person whose ego has been destroyed.
Okay.
But in whose view? In the view of the ego who's seeing Bhagavan.
Okay. Okay.
So it's the one ego. Who is it who is seeing this world? All the multiple people in this world.
The one ego.
One ego. So that one ego is what is experienced as I. So who am I? That is what we need to investigate. The point of this teaching is not about others. Let all others have annihilated their ego. What is it to me? Who am I?
Okay.
The
All right,
whole
thank you.
point of this Ekajiva Vada is for us to turn our attention back to ourselves. People ask all sorts of questions. Okay, if there's one ego, which among us is the one ego? So long as we're looking outwards, there seem to be many egos. So, but if we understand the point of the teaching, the whole point of this teaching is to turn our attention back to ourselves. So not to think about others, whether other egos have been destroyed or not. Who am I?
Barbara, it clicks into clarity, believe me.
Okay.
Stay with the program.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you,
Thank
Michael.
you. Natalia, keep asking if I get your name right. You have the next question. Go ahead.
Hi, Ted. Let me lower my hand. Hi, Michael, and hi,
Hi.
group. It's surreal to be here. I've been following along for a few years now. I sent a question in last week, Ted. Is it okay if I read it?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So, Michael, even through multiple spontaneous awakenings and deep meditative practices, I was plagued with anxiety and despair. I prayed intensely for support and guidance. And within months, during a plant medicine ceremony, something gazed at me energetically, delivering information I was really struggling to grasp. And then I felt I was pulled from a dream and awakened for a moment. Afterwards, my anxiety and despair was gone. A few months later, I was guided to a temple where on the wall hung a photo of the man who gazed at me during my ceremony. That man was Ramana Maharshi. I've never felt alone again, and I've consumed his teachings and your explanations with vigor and gratitude. However, I am plagued by an Achilles heel. Each time I reach a heightened level of consciousness, within days, a male lover appears, and I turn my attention to him and not my practice. It feels like I'm being tested and failing. I feel deeply unworthy, unlovable, unsafe, and unprotected, and that I will find this saving in a Prince Charming. I also feel ungrateful and a bad student. Ramana loved me enough to come when I cried out, and I reward it by chasing external love. I know the answer is self-investigation. However, it would mean the world to have a specific and detailed response to this vasana of romantic love and ego trying to achieve divine union through a human partner. I've watched every video I could find online. I've looked at your website. I've read the books. Don't feel like I've had this answer that detailed and specific. As women, it feels we are primed biologically and socially for this search. And while I'm realizing it has the potential to be transmuted for divine longing, it feels impossible to escape this worldly solution of a partner. So thank you for your attention.
Right. Okay. Well, don't worry about being ungrateful to Bhagavan, because Bhagavan is our mother and father. He is supremely tolerant of us because Bhagavan knows our weaknesses and understands our weaknesses. But Bhagavan has diagnosed what is the root of all our weaknesses. The root cause of all weaknesses is ego, this false awareness, I am this body. So long as we identify ourselves as a body, we experience ourselves as I am a woman, I am a man. And generally, most embodied creatures experience sexual attraction. In the vast majority of cases, we feel sexual attraction to the opposite sex. For some people, it's to the same sex, but that's really immaterial. The fact is, because we are identified with this body, we feel that attraction for the other sex. But it's not just sexual. It's not just, I mean, what we are seeking in a relationship is not just the physical gratification. As you say, it's about being loved. It's about being there's the emotional thing. There's so much invested in this, but it's all ultimately rooted in this false awareness, I am this body. Because we experience ourselves as a body, as an embodied creature, we are very vulnerable, we're weak. However much we may show outwardly, but we're very strong and secure and everything, inwardly, we all know our weakness. We know how vulnerable it is. That as an embodied creature, we lull ourselves into a false sense of security, but danger is everywhere. We can just step out into the road and be hit by a car. We may be killed, or we may be paralyzed for life, or we may think we're in the best of health and suddenly be diagnosed with cancer. Life, embodied existence, is by its very nature extremely insecure. We are extremely vulnerable. So one of the ways in which we seek security in loving and caring relationships. This is very natural for an embodied being. And that is, once we've come to Bhagavan's path, we know that our ultimate aim is to give up this identification with the body, to go beyond this false identification. But we haven't gone beyond it yet. We still experience ourselves as a body. We still experience ourselves as vulnerable. We still seek loving relationships. And another important thing about loving relationships, what is the most important thing in love? That is, when we enter a loving relationship, as a general rule, we are all expecting something from the relationship. We expect to be loved at the very minimum. But if we are truly in love, love is not so much about what we can get as what we can give. So I know relationships are not simple, but as a general rule, what we get out of any relationship is what we give into, what we put into it. So our primary focus in any relationship, if we really want the relationship to work, it should be about loving the other person. Sometimes we get into relationships where we sincerely love the other person, but that love is not reciprocated. Often those relationships break down, but the really successful relationships are where both partners are giving their all to the other. That is very, very important, because if we enter a relationship just with the idea of what we can get from it, we will surely be disappointed. This is why many people they go through one relationship after another, and none of them work, because they are seeking more what they can get from a relationship rather than what they can give to the relationship. So an ideal relationship is a relationship where both seek to give to the other. And human relationships can be a very good training ground for this spiritual practice, because when we are giving to the other, we are sacrificing ourselves, or at least to some extent, we are sacrificing ourselves for the sake of the other. And this is what the spiritual path is all about. Whether we're on a path of dualistic devotion, where we are trying to surrender ourselves to an external God, or this deeper path of devotion, where we recognize that God is not another, but is our own being. So it is to our own being we are surrendering ourselves. It's all about giving. And giving involves self-denial. That is giving ourselves up. So you said you haven't come across a specific answer. It is because there is no specific answer. That is, the human relationships are very complex. This that is, the path Bhagavan has taught us is extremely simple, because it's just a matter of turning our attention within. But because we still have very outward-going tendencies, strong outward-going inclinations, applying this in practice and not getting swept away with by our own vasanas, there are all sorts of obstacles that can come up, but all these obstacles ultimately are our own vasanas, which are rooted in ego. I don't know whether this answer, is there anything useful in what I've said, or is it all meaningless?
I have one follow-up, and then I want to
certainly.
ask questions. So I was in like my third instance of this cycle. I believe Bhagavan came in and severed this cycle.
Yeah.
And what it severed was the expectation of a partner. I had been living with a constant subconscious, deep expectation of partnership.
Yeah.
And now I don't have that. But what I'm left with is this deep desire for that kind of partnership, idolization, worship of a male kind of figure, this protective, almost like a godly quality.
Yeah.
So I've been left with this question. I feel I'm being guided to explore desire and transferring desire from worldly things to godly things. And I feel that way also because when I would read Rumi or other Sufi poets or Bhagavan's own writings about Arunachala and how he would say, you've taken me like a woman from this place. Now you must, carry out your. I never understood it. I was like, that feels romantic, and God and romance don't relate to me. Now I understand it when I read it. So I feel it's a higher teaching. Can you speak to how do we take this desire we are left with and really kind of using that for spiritual transformation? Like, is there a way to use that vasana, which for me is this deep desire for love, for worldly love? How do I kind of shift that into a self-love? Because that's the difficult thing I'm experiencing.
Right. Again, there's no simple answer to this. We're all undergoing a process. That is one thing Bhagavan often said, grace is the beginning, the middle, and the end. It may seem to us that we are doing some spiritual practice, but there's no spiritual practice without grace, because that is the central practice in Bhagavan's teaching, is this practice of trying to turn our attention within and thereby surrendering ourselves. In order to do this, this requires great love, because the nature of ego is to be always going outwards, grasping things other than itself. So to be willing to let go of other things and hold on to oneself, that love for that cannot come from ego, because the nature of ego is to always, desire is the nature of ego. Ego is always seeking something, to get something other than itself. So to get love to go back within is contrary to the very nature of ego. So that love to go within doesn't come from ego, it comes from our own being. And the love but our being, that is what we actually are, the love that we as we actually are, have for ourselves as we actually are, is the fullness of love. And that is what we as ego experience as grace. So if we put it in terms of Bhagavan, Bhagavan is what we actually are. Bhagavan loves us as himself, because in his view, we are nothing other than himself. He doesn't see us as other. So because he doesn't see us as other, he loves us as himself. So the love that Bhagavan has for us is full love. It's the fullest of all, of the fullest possible love. He has complete love for us. But whereas we have love for ourselves as this person we mistake ourselves to be, he has love for us as we actually are. And he knows that our happiness lies not in external things, but in internal things. So his grace is working to wean our mind off its desires and to transmute that desire into the love to turn within. So a lot of this is done, well, not a lot of it. This is all done by grace, ultimately. But it's not a matter of, oh, I can leave it to grace, I can just carry on my life, because grace is not something, as Bhagavan said, grace is not something that's going to descend from heaven. Grace is our own real nature. It's always in our heart. So because grace is our very being, it works through us. So the effort we make to turn within is by grace. It's by grace that gives us that liking, that inclination to try to turn within. So I understand the question you're asking, how to transmute that. I would suggest that is already happening. But the very fact that you've been drawn to this path, the very fact that you've been through relationships and you've learned lessons from these relationships, that sometimes we may have very often relationships don't work out as we had anticipated or as we had hoped, but we nevertheless learn from those relationships. So we are constantly learning from life, and grace is working in such a way that is slowly weaning our mind off all its dependence on external things and giving us the confidence to depend on what is on our own being, depend on ourselves as we actually are, not ourselves as ego, but what we actually are. Is that at all helpful?
It is helpful. I'm wondering if you can speak to the romantic element in Bhagavan's writings, to that poem for Arunachala, like that.
Yes, that is, there's a good reason why Bhagavan wrote in that particular bhava in the bhakti traditions, particularly in Vaishnava bhakti. They consider all the bhavas this what they call matara bhava, that love of the love that is according to that Baba, we are all female. That is, though whether our body is male or female doesn't matter. Spiritually, as a jiva, we are female. God is the only male. And because of, on a human level, the closest relationship we can have with a person is that I'm speaking from a heterosexual point of view. For most of it, it's that love between man and woman. For homosexuals, it's different, but it's not essentially different. It's just, but so that intimate relationship that you can have with a sexual partner is the closest type of intimacy that we have at a human level. So that is used as an analogy, a very appropriate analogy for this spiritual path, because now our minds are wedded to the world. We are trying to separate ourselves from this attachment to the world and attach ourselves to the Supreme Spirit, God, or whatever we want to call it, God or Arunachala or whatever. So it is a romantic love. It is a romantic love. But if we read Aksharamlaya very closely, it's Aksharamlaya, the 108 verses that Bhagavan wrote, in which he wrote in this particular Baba, you can see he's beautifully blending. In the same sentence, he's talking as if talking to Arunachala as another, but he's constantly emphasizing the underlying oneness. So it is a beautiful Advaitic prayer. It's a prayer for, well, it's a prayer for complete oneness. The very second verse, Arahu Sundaram Bol Ahamum Di Yomut Rabinama Irupon Arunachala. That means Arahu and Sundaram, that is the names of Bhagavan's mother and father. Arahu is a Tamil word that means beauty. Sundaram is a Sanskrit word that means beauty. So when he says, like Arahu and Sundaram, it's got a double meaning. It means like my mother and father, as they were one. It also means as there's no difference between the words that Arahu and Sundaram, outwardly they appear to be two different words, but in meaning they're one and the same, they're inseparable. So like that, ahamum niyam, I and you, then the next word can be, depending on how it's split, it can mean utru, which means joining, uniting. It can also mean mutru, which means completely. Abhinama irupo. May we be completely non-separate. So maybe uniting, may we be non-separate, or maybe if we take it as mutru, completely. So like Arahu and Sundaram, may you and I be completely non-separate. That's what he's praying for. So it's a beautiful, there's so much emphasis there on the oneness. That is in the very first verse, he says to Arunachala, you eradicate the ego of those who think of you in the heart as I. That's the first verse. And the very next verse, he asks for that complete oneness. And that's going on throughout the 108 verses. In so many different ways, he's praying for that state of complete oneness. Because true love, as I think it was, someone raised a question about love earlier. We think love is between, but because we're used to love at a human level, it seems to be between one and another. But ultimately, the fullness of love is the state in which the two become one, in which one alone remains. So the romantic love is a very good metaphor. It's difficult to use an adequate word because it is extremely romantic, but the love for God is a romantic love. I mean, it's the ultimate it's the ultimate union. It's the ultimate merging of two as one. And there's so many beautiful verses there. Like there's one verse talking about love. There's one verse where Bhagavan expresses the love in such a beautiful way. Towards the end, I think it's verse 101, if I remember correctly. Ambu vilalipol amburu vunilene anbai karetarolaranachala. That means, like ice in water, melt me as love in you, the form of love. So this is the ultimate romantic love, where you want to lose yourself completely in God, who is love itself. That is, just like ice and water, they are the same substance. They seem to be separate because the ice is solidified. So as a jiva, we seem to be separate from God because of our hard-heartedness. So we are praying to be melted completely in him, to lose ourselves completely in him, because we're never actually separate from him. The ice is never actually anything other than water. So we are never actually anything other than love. But we seem to be something other than love because of our identification with this body. So the state in which we lose ourselves in that love, merge in that love. So it's extremely romantic. It's the ultimate romance.
On that beautiful note, we have to end for the day. It's been a full and fast 2 hours as always.
Yes.
And I really appreciate all that you had to say and all of your answers.
Yeah.
And all the questions. Natalia, thank you very much for coming with your question today. And I want to make just one real brief observation, Michael, because you put it very succinctly and very clearly. And it's something that applies to, if not all of us, certainly applies to me. It applies to, I think, many people here when we're struggling to find the way inward. And you said, how do I turn inward more? And your answer was, I would suggest that is already happening. And I've seen that happen.
Yeah, it is happening, but we are part of the process. So we shouldn't think, oh, I'll leave it to grace and I'll just get on with my life. We have to understand that we have to be we are part of this process, because grace is not something other than ourselves. Grace is our own being.
It's fascinating how this works. There are many components, and that's probably the most important. Yet something invisible seems to be involuntary, like a magnet draws us to this endeavor with Ramana, which is just remarkable.
Bhagavan himself referred to Arunachala as this magnetic hill. And in one of the verses of Vaksharamla, he prays, Kantami rumupol kavandene vidamo kalandeno dirupaya Arunachala. Like magnets attracting iron, attract me and make me one with you.
So again, Michael, final word goes to you if you have anything else you'd like to say, and then we'll wrap it up.
I don't know what to say.
I love it when I can put you on the spot.
May Bhagavan give us all the love just to be somewhere for Sumirupadu, just being as we actually are.
Well, that's a lot.
Because that is the ultimate fulfillment of love.